dementia, connecting our lives to help us survive. So we spend our time to the fullest we can. We're seeing our lives.
Hi, welcome to Professional Insights, created by Dementia Action Alliance. I'm proud to be your host, Laurie Scher. During our Professional Insights podcast, we have educational conversations with professionals in the dementia community to provide answers and support to people living with dementia and care partners. My guest today is Dr. Susan Wehry. We will be discussing a topic of growing interest in the dementia community, and that's VSED, VSED, Voluntary Stop Eating and Drinking. This as a means to decide your right to die with dignity. Dr. Susan Wehry is a geriatric psychiatrist on a mission to help create conditions in the community, in hospitals, clinics, and long-term care, where all people, including those of us living with dementia, can thrive. Susan currently directs Aging Me, a federally funded program designed to help the healthcare workforce become better able to serve older adults and those living with dementia. Dr. Wehry is a former DAA board member. And Susan, it is so wonderful to have you back with us today. Welcome and thank you for giving your time.
Oh, Laura, you're so welcome. Thanks for having me back. I've missed being here and missed the times that we have together at DAA. So thank you very much for having me.
What a joy and a blessing. Well, I'm going to get right to it here because we have a short amount of time and so many questions because I know people want to know about this. So start with VSED, VSED, and I've also seen it as VSEAD. What is it and why is it important for us to talk about this?
Yeah, thanks, Laurie. So VSED, as you said in the intro, stands for Voluntarily Stopping Eating and Drinking. So VSED for Voluntarily Stopping Eating and Drinking. And it's a legal end-of-life option for basically hastening death. And it is an option that allows people to have some control, to some extent, over the timing and manner of their death. Generally, VSED is considered a pretty peaceful way to die, though I don't mean to suggest that it is without any discomfort, because there is absolutely discomfort when you stop eating and drinking. And you can kind of guess what they might be. People experience hunger pangs. They experience thirst. They have a desire to drink, but it's actually the not drinking that causes dehydration, that hastens the end of life. And I think one reason that it's of growing interest is that, as you know, Laurie, there are in about, I think it's about 17 states now, laws have been passed to give people who have capacity the right to request aid in dying. And this is done with a physician. Medications are prescribed to hasten a person's death. But this option is not available to people living with dementia. And the reason being is that there is always some kind of criteria that death has to be in the near future, say 6 months or whatever the criteria is. And for people living with dementia, that phase of their dementia, at the end of that journey, is a time in which they are not likely to have capacity. And so that's the conundrum. VSED is also a choice and a decision for which capacity is needed, meaning the ability to make the decision, to know what you're choosing, know that it will hasten death, know what it will be like, and choosing to do it. But people in an earlier stage of dementia have that capacity and so can elect to do it at a time before they've entered a terminal phase. It's a way for many people, of preserving dignity. It's a way for all people to exert choice, control, and autonomy. And yeah, so I think it's really a very, very interesting topic, and one that I'm so glad that we're going to be able to explore in dementia discussions as well.
I am too. And I I think it's terrible that they take people living with dementia and say that you don't know when you're going to die. My mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and they said she had 3 months to live. She lived 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So to the doctors aren't God. To put a label on it, I think is that's really hard to do. And yet they on dementia they totally want to put a label on you don't know when you're going to die, but other diseases they do. It's very interesting. Very sad actually. But so how does this differ from medical aid in dying, or what we've also been heard it called was assisted suicide? Now you said it was legal, whereas assisted suicide in most states aren't. But how does it, what's the difference?
Yeah, so I think that there are a lot of key differences, really. Um, with voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, it is pretty much a non-medical kind of approach to hastening death, meaning that you don't need a doctor's involvement. It is advised to have a palliative care team, to have some health professionals, if you will, and to talk it over with your physician or nurse practitioner. But in terms of the being present when somebody has stopped eating and drinking, and keeping vigil with them as they go through the process of hastening death from not eating and drinking, doesn't really require special medical knowledge. It's a much more supportive, hospice-like, palliative care-like, non-medical way of hastening what most people would call a more natural way to die. Medical aid in dying in those 17 or 20 states where it is legal. So sometimes you'll hear that referred to as MAID, medical aid in dying. Sometimes you'll hear it called physician-assisted suicide. Some places, like in my state of Maine, it's called death with dignity. In that situation, there's a very well prescribed approach that must involve a medical provider. So most places request once medications that you take to end your life. They have to be self-administered. The person has to have capacity to make that decision and the ability to actually take the pills themselves. Another person can't give them to them. And generally in most states, there has to be two requests. So you might go in for medical aid in dying, talk it over with your physician, talk about what your terminal illness is, has to be within or predicted within 6 months. Though, as you pointed out, Lori, we don't know. We just have like maybe and probably, and many people like this do, and that sort of thing. And then you put it in writing, and then you come back and you ask again, and then are prescribed pills. So very, a really a definite medical and medicalized intervention. Which isn't to say that, hospice also can't be around for support and palliative support. Involuntarily stopping eating and drinking, exactly as the name implies, you really just stop eating and drinking. And what's very hard for families oftentimes is that when a person has not had anything to drink for a day or two, they may start saying, I'm thirsty, please give me something to drink. And because in dehydration, depending on underlying medical conditions, a person may begin to get a little bit more confused, say. So you may say to them, we talked about this, and you told me that if you asked for water, not to give it to you. And
Hmm.
then the person
Wow.
says, I know I said that, but I'm begging you. And you will often see within families this split. Some family members will say, we have to honor the original wish. Some people will say you have to honor the current wish of giving water. And the and so with voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, there's a whole process of comfort care and attention to oral hygiene and wetting the lips without giving water. There are ways to keep a person comfortable to avoid some of those potential conflicts, but um, it's not always easy on family to keep the vigil. So it's slower than medical aid in dying because, you take medications that are designed to have you stop breathing, you will stop breathing. And, that death will occur within minutes to hours, whatever it is. With voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, death may occur in 1 or 2 days. 3 days is more likely if people have underlying health conditions. But as you know, people can go on hunger strikes and live for 2, 3 weeks. If they stop drinking, it's really the not drinking. We can go a long time without food, but we can't go that long without water. So, um, I guess to sum that up, the biggest difference is one is legal in all states, and that's the voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. We always have the right to refuse treatment, and that includes refusing eating and drinking. And with the medical aid in dying, asking for medicines that you can take to end your life is legal in only about 17 states.
Wow. And I think myself, oh, I like food too much to tell myself to stop eating and drinking. That has to be, you have to be disciplined to do that, wouldn't you say?
That's a great observation, Lori. You have to be disciplined. You have to be clear in your own mind and maybe even willful, determined, sure, even perhaps more than disciplined, or alongside of discipline, or all these other qualities of I'm very clear in my own mind and heart, this is what I want. And I have an illness. Like, for people, maybe their suffering is intolerable to them, their physical pain, their psychic pain, but it's intolerable in the here and now. The anticipation of it is intolerable. Maybe they just decide they've lived as long as they want to and live in a state where they can't request a different way of choosing their death, the way they've chosen to live their lives. So, um, yeah, and I think, Lori, it's also different when we imagine trying to put ourselves in the shoes of someone. When
Yeah,
we're in a position of relative health and trying to imagine what it would be like to do now is very different than imagining what it would be like to do it at some other imagined future point.
right. Oh, I agree. Um, it's hard to think through all these options, and I think certainly medical assisted suicide would be a lot easier than going through this, in my opinion. But I also know we have people there that'll help. So can hospice, and then what's this death doula person? What is a
Yeah,
death doula? I've
yeah,
heard.
so a death doula, like a birth doula, right, is a non-medical person who is trained in the art of easing a person in transition, is the way I think of it. Either birth coming into life or death doulas leaving life. And so there are people who oftentimes come from a particular spiritual orientation, certainly emotional and psychological support and health. They keep vigil. They help families with the planning of caring for the body once the spirit has gone, once the person has died, helping them make funeral arrangements, helping them plan a service, maybe while the person is dying to make tell their legacy story. And so it's somebody who accompanies, the way I think about it, they accompany the person on exiting life, the way birth doulas accompany the mother on giving birth and the new baby coming into the world. So they are there just for the dying person. And their role is not to give medicine, though they might alert people to maybe there being pain. But yeah, I keep like vigil keepers and people who are so comfortable talking about death, and being present, bearing witness to the ending of life, like the beginning of life. So death doulas don't, you don't have to have a certificate to be one or to call yourself one, though there are lots of certification programs, some better than others. And there's a growing body, I think, of knowledge and expertise among people who wish to be sometimes just volunteers in that doula role.
What about hospice? Where does hospice come into play? I mean, um, do they get involved in this or?
Well, it's interesting. They can. There's nothing that prevents them from getting involved in it. And many hospice organizations um, support voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. But I have to tell you, from my reading of the literature, it seems like there are also some who don't. And I think the other unique setting where it's hard for hospice is if the person is in a long-term care setting and wants to do this. There is a profound conflict for nursing staff when somebody voluntarily stops eating and drinking. And that means refusing eating, somebody offering you something to eat, as well as feeding tubes or IV hydration, right? And regulators aren't sure how they feel about it. So if somebody on the day the surveyors come into a nursing home is lying there saying, I'm thirsty, and the staff says to the regulator, the surveyor, oh, she doesn't want us to give her anything to drink, the surveyor is likely to say, but she's asking for something to
Uh,
drink.
yeah.
She does want, and if you don't give her, I'm going to fine you for neglect. And so oftentimes, I think for health professionals, and I think this is where it gets complicated for some hospice workers who don't understand, or maybe they understand but don't quite agree with VSED, um, get into these conflicts about meeting the person in the moment and honoring their wishes of their advance directive. And I'm not saying it's easy, but I think, a thoughtful conversation planned well in advance, creating all the conditions under which the kind of death a person wants is at least you've created the conditions in which that can occur. Then I suspect that, some hospice teams would be okay with it.
Okay. Wow. There's so much in all this to think about and work through. I mean, it's a hard decision, no matter what decision we look at. It's hard for me to picture myself living to the point that I don't recognize my family.
Mhm.
But yeah, these are hard choices, and but you've given us so much enlightened information, and Susan, I just want to thank you for joining us today and for sharing this information about VSED. This certainly gives us a lot of things to think about. And so thank you for being a part of this today.
You're welcome and great to see you as always. Thanks for having me.
Ah, you too, my friend. And for you, my audience, Dementia Action Alliance is committed to enhancing lives, connecting people, increasing understanding. And I'd like to thank you so much for joining DAA for our Professional Insights podcast. More podcasts and a lot of valuable resources are available at daanow.org. And you can help continue these podcasts and other programs that enhance the lives of the dementia community with a donation at daanow.org. Thank you for being a part of our community.
We're working to lose the stigma, from challenge to change, how people exchange, so we live our lives to the fullest we can. So we live our life to the fullest. can.